Welcome to my economic class. Consumers' demand for a particular good depends on the four factors: the price of the good itself, price of other goods, whether the goods are substitutes or complementary, the consumer's income, and her taste and preferences. Given the price of the goods and consumer's taste and preferences, the quantity of a commodity that the consumer is willing to buy and able to afford is called the demand for a commodity. Whenever one or more of the variables change, the quantity demanded is likely to change. Demand curve. Demand curve is a graphical representation of demand function. It shows the relationship between the quantity demanded for a commodity and the price of the commodity. The dependent variable quantity is measured along the horizontal axis and independent variable price measured along the vertical axis. When the price of the commodity is P, the quantity demanded for a commodity is X. When the price increases to P2, the quantity demanded decreases to X2 from X. When the price decreases to P1, quantity demanded increases to X1 from X. So there is an inverse relationship between the quantity demanded for a commodity and a price. When the price increases, the demand decreases, and price decreases, the demand increases. While other factors remain unchanged, any change in price, it leads to movement along the demand curve from here to here or from here to here. There is a movement along the demand curve, and demand function is X is equal to the function of P. Here X is a quantity demanded, which is a dependent variable. It depends upon price. P is a price. It is an independent variable. How to derive a demand curve from indifference curves. In the figure 1, x-axis shows the good X apples and y-axis shows the good Y mangoes. Draw the budget line and indifference curve IC1. Consumer will be equilibrium at point C, where she buys X1 quantities of apples and Y1 quantities of mangoes. The figure 2, x-axis shows apples and y-axis shows the price of the apples. We plot P1 and X1, which is the first point on the demand curve. Suppose the price of apples decreases while income remains same and price of other good remains same. The budget line becomes flatter. New consumption equilibrium will be at point D. where the consumer buys more of apples, x2 quantities of apples, and less of mangoes, y2 quantities of mangoes. When the price decreases, the demand for apple increases. She will substitute apple for mangoes. So the new price is P2 and new quantity is x2. Plot P2 and x2 in the figure 2 to get the second point on the demand curve. When the price of apple again decreases, we will get a new budget line and new equilibrium point at E. Where consumer buys more of apples and less of mangoes. She will buy x3 quantities of apples and y3 quantities of mangoes. The new price will be P3 and new quantity will be x3. So plot P3 and x3 in figure 2. To get new point on the demand curve. Join all these points, we will get a downward sloping demand curve. The negative slope of the demand curve is due to substitution effect and income effect. When the apples become cheaper, consumer maximize her utility by substituting apples for mangoes. This is substitution effect. When the price of apple decreases, the purchasing power of the consumer increases, which increases demand for apples. This is the income effect of the price change. Normal goods and inferior goods. Demand for a commodity increases or decreases with a change in the income of the consumer depending on the nature of the good. With an increase in the income, the demand for a good increases, or with a decrease in the income, demand for a good decreases. Such goods are known as normal goods. But there are some goods. With the increase in the income, the demand for such goods decreases. With a decrease in the income, the demand for such goods increases. Such goods are called inferior goods. The best example is low quality cereals. With increase in the income of the consumer may not increase the purchase of the low quality cereals. Substitutes and complements. Goods which are consumed together are called complementary goods. The best example is bread and jam or bread and butter, tea and sugar, socks and shoes, like that. So when the price of sugar increases, the demand for the tea decreases, and vice versa. When the price of jam increases, the demand for bread decreases. Such goods are known as complementary goods. Substitutes. Substitute are the goods that we can substitute for each other. For example, tea and coffee. When the price of coffee increases, consumer can shift it to tea, then demand for tea increases. Shift in demand. On the other hand, changes in any of other things. If the price of other goods changes or income of the consumer and her taste and preferences changes, this lead to shift in the demand curve. In this figure, demand curve shift to rightward. Here, the demand curve shift leftward. The price of other goods and taste and preferences of the consumer remain same. If the income of the consumer increases, the demand for the goods changes. So there is a shift in demand curve. For normal goods, demand curve shifts rightward because with an increase in the income of the consumer, demand for normal goods increases. For inferior goods, demand curve shifts leftward because with an increase in the income of the consumer, demand for the inferior goods decreases. Consumers' income and taste and preferences remain same if the price of related goods changes. There is a shift in the demand curve. If there is an increase in the price of substitute good, the demand curve shift rightward. For example, if the price of the tea increases, the demand for the coffee increases. If there is an increase in the price of complementary goods, the demand curve shift leftward. For example, increase in the price of the jam, the demand for the bread decreases. If the income of the consumer and the price of related goods remain same, if the consumer's taste and preferences changes, there is a shift in the demand curve. If the consumer's preferences change in favor of a good, the demand curve for that good shift upward. For example, consumer prefer ice cream in summer season, the demand for the ice cream increases. So there is a upward shift of the demand curve. Demand curve shift leftward due to unfavorable change in the preferences of the consumer. Market demand is the horizontal summation of individual demand curves. Figure 1 and 2 shows individual demand curves. The figure 1, when the price is P, the quantity demanded is Q1. When price decreases to P1, quantity demanded increases to Q1 dash. In the figure 2, when the price is P, the quantity demanded is Q2. When the price decreases to P1, quantity demanded increases to Q2 dash. Third figure shows the market demand. When the price is P, the quantity demanded for a commodity is Q1 plus Q2. When the price decreases to P1, the quantity demanded increases to Q1 dash plus Q2 dash. This is the market demand for a commodity. It is the horizontal summation of individual demand curves.